The engine roar wasn't a hum. It was a scream. A mechanical shriek tearing through the sound barrier, getting louder, deeper, and closer with every split second. You look up from the deck, squinting against the harsh Pacific sun. At 4,000 feet, the silhouette is small, a gray speck against the blue. But it's not flying level. It's not maneuvering for a dogfight. The nose is pointed directly at you. The pilot isn't dropping a bomb. He isn't firing his machine guns. He is the bomb. If you want to uncover the raw, unfiltered history of the Pacific War, please take a second to subscribe. We are digging up the stories that textbooks forgot. It was April 16th, 1945. The waters off Okinawa. The desperate end of an empire. The United States Navy had surrounded the island, forming a massive steel wall. And on the radar screen of the USS Laffey, a destroyer picket ship, a nightmare was unfolding. They weren't facing a squadron. They were facing a swarm. 50 planes, all inbound, all with a one-way ticket. Jack stood strapped into his 20mm Oerlikon mount on the starboard side. The harness dug into his shoulders. His helmet felt heavy, baking in the tropical heat. The metal of the gun tub vibrated against his ribs. He could feel the ship's engines thrumming through the soles of his boots. But inside his head, everything was silent. He tried to swallow, but his throat was dry as sandpaper. He gripped the handles of the gun until his knuckles turned white. The air smelled of salt spray and heavy fuel oil. The sky was a perfect, innocent blue. Then the lookout's voice cracked over the squawk box. "Bandits! 3 o'clock! High!" Jack spun the heavy gun. The gears ground together. He saw them. 3 Mitsubishi Zeros. They were diving in a tight formation, wings glinting in the sunlight. They looked beautiful, and then the lead plane's wings leveled out. "Open fire! Open fire! I see them!" The gun bucked against Jack's shoulder. Boom, 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 boom. Tracers spiraled out, vivid red lines painting the sky. The lead Zero didn't flinch. Usually a pilot pulls up when the flak gets heavy. Usually a pilot values his life. This plane flew through the wall of exploding steel like it didn't exist. Smoke trailed from its left wing. Jack adjusted his aim, leading the target. The plane was growing larger. He could see the propeller spinning. He could see the red circle of the rising sun on the fuselage. The plane wasn't aiming for the water. It was aiming for the bridge. In the pocket of a flight suit, miles away in a barracks back in Japan, a letter waited to be found. It was written by a 22-year-old named Hayashi. He wrote, "Dear Mother, please do not cry for me. I am going to do a great thing. I will become a firefly and smile." Jack slammed his foot on the trigger pedal. The barrel was overheating. The Zero was 500 yards away, then 400. The sound was deafening now, a physical weight pressing against Jack's chest. Explosions blossomed around the plane. Black puffs of flak tore at the metal skin. A chunk of the Zero's tail flew off. It rolled inverted, but it kept coming. "Turn!" Jack screamed at the pilot. "Turn away!" He didn't. The plane roared over Jack's head, so close the wash nearly knocked him down. It smashed into the main deck. A fireball erupted. The shockwave lifted Jack off his feet and slammed him into the steel wall of the gun tub. For a second, there was only darkness. Then came the heat. The smell of burning aviation fuel mixed with the sickening scent of searing paint and ozone. Jack scrambled up. His ears were ringing, a high-pitched whine that drowned out the world. He looked toward the midship. The 5-inch gun mount was gone. Just a twisted wreckage of burning steel. Men were crawling out of the smoke, blackened figures stumbling on the slick deck. Jack checked his gun. The magazine was empty. His loader, a kid named Miller from Ohio, was staring at the fire, mouth open. "Load!" Jack yelled. Miller didn't move. He was frozen, staring at the carnage. "Miller, load the damn gun!" They aren't stopping." "Load it!" Jack grabbed Miller's collar and shook him. Miller blinked. The fear in his eyes was primal. He grabbed a fresh drum magazine. His hands shook, fumbling with the catch. Click. Jack spun the mount back to the horizon. His heart hammered against his ribs like a trapped bird. He realized then that this wasn't a battle. This was an execution. Another diary entry found later captured the mindset of the men inside those cockpits. "We are the divine wind. My life is lighter than a feather. My duty is heavier than a mountain." Jack looked up. 2 more planes were coming from the stern. They were low, skimming the waves. They were trying to stay under the radar, hiding in the spray of the ocean. The ship's 40mm Bofors guns opened up, a rhythmic thumping that shook the deck plates. One of the Zeros caught a shell in the fuel tank. It exploded instantly, cartwheeling into the sea. A massive splash of white water, but the second one pulled up. It climbed straight up, defying gravity, stalling at the top of the arc. Then it nosed over. It was coming straight down the funnel. Jack couldn't shoot. The angle was too steep. The gun stop prevented him from aiming straight up. He could only watch. The pilot was coming for him. He could see the canopy. He imagined the man inside. Was he screaming? Was he praying? Was he eyes open or eyes closed? The Zero slammed into the rear gun mount, just 30 feet away. The explosion tore the ship apart. Debris rained down like hail. A piece of jagged aluminum the size of a dinner plate slammed into the shielding of Jack's tub. The ship listed heavily to port. Water was rushing in. Fires were raging in the wardroom. The communications were dead. The rudder was jammed 26 degrees left. The USS Laffey was driving in circles, a burning, bleeding target, and they were still coming. Jack wiped soot from his eyes. His hands were blistered from the hot metal of the gun. He looked at Miller. Miller was bleeding from the forehead, but he was holding another magazine. "How many?" Miller asked. "Too many," Jack said. But Jack didn't run. He strapped himself back in. The ship was dying. The ocean was waiting to swallow them. But as long as the gun fired, he had a job. He swung the barrel toward the port bow. Another Val dive bomber was making its run. This one was slow, damaged. It was dragging a trail of black smoke. It looked like a wounded bird trying to find a place to rest, but the pilot wrestled the controls. He lined up on the Laffey's bridge. Jack took a breath. He forced his body to become stone. He ignored the screaming of the wounded. He ignored the heat of the fires behind him. He focused on the crosshairs. He led the target. 1 breath, 2 breaths. He squeezed the trigger. The gun roared. The tracers lashed out. He saw the impacts. Flash, flash, flash on the engine cowling. The propeller shattered. The plane dipped. It missed the bridge by inches. It clipped the mast, spun wildly, and crashed into the ocean on the other side of the ship. Jack let out a breath he didn't know he was holding. "Got him," he whispered. But there was no time to celebrate. "Target! Stern!" Jack spun around. The hydraulics whined. For 80 minutes, the attack continued. 22 planes attacked the USS Laffey. 6 kamikazes crashed into her. 4 bombs hit her directly. She was on fire from bow to stern. She was sitting so low in the water the waves were lapping at the main deck. But the guns never stopped firing. When the ammunition elevators failed, men carried 40-pound shells by hand through the smoke. When the water mains burst, men fought fires with their own urine and blankets. Finally, the sky cleared. The remaining Japanese planes, low on fuel or out of ammunition, turned back toward Okinawa. Jack unbuckled the strap. He tried to step out of the tub, but his legs gave way. He slid down to the steel deck. He looked at his hands. They were black with grease and soot. They were shaking uncontrollably. Silence rushed back in. It was heavier than the noise. The only sound was the crackle of fires and the groans of the ship's metal cooling down. Jack looked over the rail. The water was littered with debris, oil slicks, pieces of wings, and bodies. Some were American sailors. Some were Japanese pilots. In death, bobbing in the Pacific swell, they looked the same. According to official U.S. Navy records, the kamikaze attacks were the most effective weapon Japan deployed in the entire war. Over 3,000 pilots flew to their deaths. They sank 34 ships and damaged 368 others. Nearly 5,000 American sailors were killed by these human missiles. It was a tactic born of total desperation, a strategy that traded a young life for a chance to halt the inevitable. The USS Laffey survived that day. They call her the ship that would not die. But the men on her deck were never the same. They had looked into the face of an enemy who welcomed death. Jack survived the war. He went back to a small town in the Midwest. He married, had kids. But every time he heard a sudden engine noise, he looked up. He checked the sky. If you want to hear more forgotten stories of the people who lived through World War II, please subscribe. This channel exists to bring their voices back. War creates heroes, but it also creates ghosts. And on that day, in the skies over Okinawa, the ghosts were flying zeros.